Hello everyone. In this video, we'll be talking about hypothesis. So what is hypothesis basically? A hypothesis is a statement that a researcher comes up with and which is exactly the researcher believes will be the outcome of the study. Most of the time, the hypothesis is based on literature. There are certain differences that we always have in terms of like different types of hypotheses. So let's look into them. Now, the first major difference between the hypothesis is directional and non-directional. If you say that you have a hypothesis that a variable has an effect on another variable, and you also know whether it would be a positive effect or a negative effect, that is a directional hypothesis. We also call them one-tailed hypothesis. When we do not know whether this effect would be positive or a negative, and we are still making a hypothesis that one variable has an effect on another variable, that is a non-directional hypothesis. There are some examples that I would like to share with you. X positively influences with Y. This is a directional hypothesis. X influences Y. Now see, we're not saying whether it would be a positive influence or a negative influence. This is a non-directional hypothesis. X has a negative impact on Y. Now, this is again a directional hypothesis because we are talking about a negative relationship over here. Here, it has an impact, no direction, whether it would be a positive or a negative. An increase in Y will result in an increase in X will result in increase in Y. A change in X will result in change in Y. Now, we are not talking about what direction of change we will have in both times. Y will increase as X decreases, a negative relationship. Now, Y will change as X decreases, but we are not talking about whether it would increase or it will decrease. So we do not have any directional relationship over here. Now, likewise, we can divide the hypothesis into simple and complex. A simple hypothesis involves only two variables, one IV and one DV. However, when you're writing a complex hypothesis, the number of variables included in the hypothesis would be more than two. We would go beyond an IV and DV. We will have some probably mediators, moderators involved within the hypothesis. So let's have a look at that. X positively influences Y. This is a simple hypothesis, but let's have a look at this. M mediates the positive effect of X on Y. We have three variables over here, X to M and then M to Y. W moderates the relationship between X and Y. Now we know that there is another variable that is influencing the relationship between X and Y. So this is a complex hypothesis. Now, there's an interesting feature over here that this hypothesis does not have a direction. It's a non-directional, but it's a complex hypothesis. Now, look at this one. M1 and M2 serially mediate the effect of X on Y. Again, it's a non-directional hypothesis, but it is a complex one. From X to M1 to M2 to Y. So we have three arrows there within the four variables. Now, let's have a look at this. W moderates the effect of X on Y through M. So we have a mediator, we have an independent variable, we have a dependent variable, and we have a moderator over here, four variables. So these are some different kind of hypotheses that we can have. We can also classify our hypothesis in terms of null or alternate hypothesis. When we say there is a null hypothesis states that there is no relationship. There are different kind of tests even where you have a default null hypothesis, and if the probability is less than 0.05, we say that null hypothesis is rejected. And when probability is less than 0.05, we say that alternate hypothesis, where we are stating there is a relationship, that is accepted. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. And how do we state the null hypothesis that X does not affect Y? It's a non-directional hypothesis. And we can also have it that X has an effect on Y. This is again a non-directional, but this is an alternate hypothesis. Now, we can also say that X has a negative effect on Y. So that is again another alternate hypothesis, which is going in against the null hypothesis, which states that X does not have any effect. Another way in which we can classify our hypothesis can be correlational hypothesis and causal hypothesis. Now, in our correlational hypothesis, we are talking about the correlation between among the variables, and in the causal hypothesis, we are talking about the cause and effect relationship. So the hypothesis would be something like that, that X has a positive correlation with Y. In the causal one, we will have X has a positive effect on Y. See, the difference between the two kind of hypotheses is interrelationship and dependency. In the correlation, we are saying that they're interdependent. We are not talking about which one is independent variable and which one is the dependent variable. We are just saying that they're moving in the same direction. But when we're talking about the causal hypothesis, we are assuming one to be an initiator or an independent variable and the other one to be a dependent variable. So these are some of the classifications of the hypothesis. Hope this would help you. Please subscribe this channel so that you don't miss any future videos.